Begin the current Daf Mesech is Bava Kama Daf Beis. Begin on the bottom line of the Naval from Beis, where the Gemara finishes up the conversation with the previous Daf regarding similar types of ideas of giving over the deli and what is the significance of it if you're saying the kinyan happens in some other way already. So why is that significant about giving over the deli? Throughout the entire world. Olav Hashalom on his yard side. Some of these discussed in today's daf are Barshal Shnei Shutfin, where we spoke about the pit of two partners. Next Mishnah continues Kisor Rishon. If the first guy covered it, and the second guy comes and he finds it uncovered, the Lekisor doesn't cover it. Okay, so Hashem is going to be chayiv. Now, what happens if Lekisor Rishon or Barshal Lekisor? What happens if the first guy didn't cover it and the second guy also didn't cover it? They're both going to be liable. The question about how long is the first guy going to be potter in the cases when we say that he is potter. What happens if you covered it appropriately, but and an ox or donkey falls in? Okay, and it dies, you're going to be potter because you covered it appropriately. What happens like you didn't cover it appropriately, but dies? Then you can be liable. Now the Gemara is going to be a little bit of a complex discussion. If a person covered a covering that could withstand oxen, but cannot withstand camels, and then camels came along and they ruined the covering. And oxen come, and then oxen fall in. What's halacha going to be? Or you covered a covering that could withstand for oxen. It could handle oxen's weight. We cannot handle camels. And there are camels that are around, but it ends up being not even from the camel. It gets the worms, it gets rotted from the inside. What would the halacha be in that situation? Which can be interesting conversations in our Gemara. So begin the current Daf Nanal Beis. The bottom line. It's a related discussion from the previous Gemara. Amir Shema Levi says, if someone sells a house to his friend, as you get in the Beis Menal, once he gives him over the keys, Conley acquires. His Gemara says, give him over the keys? Which kin is that? Hechadami. Ibakasba. We know that karka, which is bias, going with kesef shtar chazaka. So if you're going with money, so like ibakasba, you already acquired the money. Ibakazaka taking possession, like ibakazaka taking possession and acquire that way. What is that? What does giving over the keys have to do with anything? Says Chazaka. Truth is, you're right. He's acquiring with a chazaka. But the Ba'il has to tell him, go ahead and take possession and acquire. When he gives him over the keys, it's like saying, actions speak louder than words. It's saying, here, go ahead, this is your house, take possession and acquire it. So Tomer Shlakish Mishem Yane says, if someone sells a flock to his friend, once he gives him over the mashchuchis, which later on the Gemara is going to explain, the word mashchuchis and the word of meshicha, it's something that pulls the whole flock after him. Once he gives him over the mashchuchis, he acquires the flock. Even meshicha, if he's acquiring the animals by pulling them, which is like you could make them move with a stick and they run in front of him because that's the way of small animals. That's how you draw them, like meshicha. So acquire meshicha. Why do you need to give over this mashchuchis? And even mesira, if you're acquiring them with giving over, which let's say it was a street or it was a courtyard not owned by either one of them, which meshicha does not acquire over there. Because meshicha only acquires in the simton, like an alleyway or a courtyard of both of them, as the Gemara says in Babasa of Ayin Vav and Beis. So you weren't able to be mekayna with meshicha, you're with mesira. So like mesira, acquire with giving it over. What is this giving over the mashchuchas? Says Gemara, meshicha, truth, we're talking about meshicha, where the guy hit them and they started running, and that he acquires that way. But the owners tell him, go, do meshicha and acquire. But the key in the Muslim mashchuchas, when he's given the mashchuchas, command the amalei, as if he already told him, lech mashchuch v'kadna, then we go do meshicha and acquire, and therefore that's what its equivalency is. Says Gemara, my mashchuchas. Here they translate it's karkashta, which is a bell that you shake in front of the flock, and they follow him. That's the mashchuchas. That's like saying, here, go ahead and acquire. It's like the keys. Rabbi Yaakov says it's Iza the Azla B'Reish Edra. It's the goat that goes in front of the flock, which the owner of the flock has a very sharp goat, and goats generally go in the front, and the flock follows after him. That's what the mashchuchas is. As the Gemara says, Kedash Hugi Lilah, Rav Chizda was a certain Galilean that he gave a drasha in front of Rav Chizda. He said, Kadrog Zraya al Ana. When the shepherd is upset on the flock, Ovid Lenagoida, he makes for the goat that draws them, Samusa. He blinds the eyes of the goat that goes in front, and that goat stumbles and falls in pits, and the flock follows after that. Wow, so too Hashem, when he wants to punish so to speak, euphemistically, the enemies of the Jewish people, or maybe it is the enemies of the Jewish people. Which one is it? It says Misayni Yisrael, but sometimes euphemistically. But maybe it is. Yeah, hopefully. Right. Hopefully, it should be for the Hamas ISIS that he appoints them leaders that are inappropriate, that are living in Qatar with billions of dollars and enjoying themselves, and then they all follow after them and they all go and Gehenna together. Which one? Right. But the Yidden. Yeah, it says Sayin Yisrael. Yeah, but it should taka be with the Sayin Yisrael. But Akapanim, that's what Hashem does. That he blinds the eyes of the leader, meaning he makes inappropriate leaders, and then they stumble, and everyone stumbles after them. Now look at the next Mishnah that continues on this idea of a Bar Shel Shnei Shufim that we mentioned in the previous Mishnah. So what happens if Kisah Rishon? What happens if the first guy covers the pit when he used it? Okay, he did his thing. Who closed the Aron Kodesh? The famous who left the Aron Kodesh? Our minion, we closed it. I covered the pit. The second guy comes along and he uses it. Matzah Megula, and he finds it uncovered, which Rashi's bothered. How's that possible? The first guy covered it. He says, let's say it rotted and the cover broke, but he found it uncovered. Well, like so, maybe he's upset at the first guy. He says, well, chutzpah, this guy didn't cover it. He didn't realize it just broke down, so he doesn't cover it. Okay, the second guy is going to be chayv, the first is going to be potter. So Rashi explains that the Gemara is going to explain how long the first guy is going to be potter for. Obviously, not potter forever, but we learn, meaning if the first guy didn't cover it and the second guy comes and finds it uncovered and doesn't cover it, you're right, they both can be chayv. It's just because the first guy covered. We learned on the previous daf that only the second guy is going to be chayv. So that says Rashi. That we already explained on the previous Amid. It's where the first guy left the second guy using it, and he relied on him to cover it. But if he walked by and left it uncovered, and the second guy walks by and covered it, you were last, you should have seen it. No, you also should have seen it. The fact that I walked second, not going to make me in Mochayiv, he would talk my way. The first guy covered it, the second guy found it uncovered, and he doesn't cover it, the second one's going to be Chayiv. Oh, right. So then we're going to see, similarly in the Gemara, so when do they become liable now? And which that actually relates a little bit to what the Mishnah is saying right now. Kiso kuro. Let's say you covered it appropriately, right? And and an ox or donkey falls in and dies. So potter, you can be potter, which is what you're describing. So the Gemara is going to ask, wait, if you did a kuro, how did any animal fall in? So that we'll see how that happens. But like kiso kuro, if he didn't cover it appropriately, and an ox or donkey falls in and dies, so then obviously you can be liable. Now, novel from the Makula Kriya. If let's say an animal falls in from the sound of digging, meaning, as Rashi explains, there was a dog pit, and some digger comes in who is hired to widen it or to deepen it, and he's digging, and the ox is walking on the edge of the pit, and he hears the sound of all this banging, and he gets frightened, and he falls on his face into the pit. So Chayiv, the owner of the pit, is going to be liable, and the chiddush of this is like this: it's two pshat in Rashi. Either that even though the ox is a pekeach, is a mentally sound ox, which the Gemara later on the Nundalman base tells us in the Mishnah that the owner of the pit is going to be potter. Why is the owner of the pit potter? Because he bayu in the mazel. The ox should have looked, and when it goes, it's not my fault, says the owner of the pit. Here he's going to be chayv because the sound of the machinery frightened the animal. So it is the liability of the pit. It's not the ox's fault al kapanim. Now the Gemara is going to ask, if that's the case, so say the one who was digging caused it. Why would the owner of the pit be liable? But the Gemara is going to address that. Another version, says Rashi, what the chiddush is that if the animal falls in front from the sound of the digging, we're saying that the owner of the pit is going to be chayiv, meaning even though you could say that really what caused it is the one who's digging, and the one who's digging does just a grama ba'alma, it's indirectly causing, which the Gemara tells us later on the Navavim Adalf, that if someone frightens his friend and he causes injury, he's going to be potter from dini adam because it's just a grama. So maybe both should be potter. Even so, that's the chiddush that the balabar is going to be chayiv. As the Gemara is going to explain from Reb Nassan, why is the owner of the pit chayiv here at all? But that's two different pshatim in the chiddush of the animal falling in front from the sound of the digging. The owner of the pit is going to be chayiv. Now, if he falls la'achrav, however, if he falls backwards, mikol kriya from the sound of the digging, then potter. Then the actual owner of the pit is going to be potter. The Gemara is going to explain why would that be. Now, Rashi just points out it's not really significant Mikol Kriya. It's just because when we said the first case that he falls face forward from the sound of the digging, we said the same also backwards from the sound of the digging. But either way, he's going to be potter anyway. Now, let's say his ox and the tools on the ox fall in and they break. Or donkey with its garments and they tear, which Rashi just points out by a shiur, it's kalim, the word shvira would be appropriate because that's the yoke and all the plowing tools. And by chamar, it's more applicable tearing because that's the saddle bag and all these things that are garments that would tear. But be that as it may, when the animal falls in and you can be chayv al behema, kalim. You can be liable for the animal, but you can put her on the vessels, as you can explain, that we say, sure, we say chamor b'lo kalim, we say that the vessels you're not chayav for. Now, navla teichai shor, let's say into this pit falls in the ox, that's a cheresh, that's a deaf mute, or shaita, mentally deranged, or a cotton, or a minor, which was going to explain what's this halacha, chayiv, then the owner of the pit's going to be liable. Now, if let's say ben bas, in other words, even though they're minors, so what's the difference? So it's very interesting. You can't say you can't say that they should have looked because they're little children. They're not cognitively aware. Even so, or evrei or maidservant or a slave pater. That's gzeis hakasav. Anytime it says a human being, it says shervei adam and chamer kalim. So that's why you can be pater even as little children, where seemingly would be the liability of the one who made the pit. Is not from gzeis hakasav. Now it says the Gemara, V'rishain, you told me a case where the first guy covered, the second guy comes, finds it uncovered, doesn't cover, the second one's going to be chayv. The second guy came and used it, and he didn't cover it. Ad emas, until how long are you going to say the responsibility is on the second guy, and that the first guy is going to be mifti, is going to be potter? So here we have three different opinions. Amar Rabbi says, B'chtei sheyada. So it's Rashi and Taisus. Rashi says that the first guy, when he comes afterwards and he sees it uncovered, now, since they both know it's uncovered, now the responsibility is on both of them. Only then is it going to be chayv. Shmuel he says, it's uhu. It's so that they notify him. Meaning, even though he didn't come and see it, he's going to be chayv in this portion. And we're not going to make the responsibility totally on the second guy, because the second guy didn't uncover it, that he should be chayv because of having opened it. He just found it uncovered and didn't cover it. But when the second guy gets notified, he becomes liable. He says, it's not enough. It has to be that they notify him, and that he has time to hire workers, and that they could chop wood, and then to use that to be and to cover, to make a new cover. But Rashi says, but the second guy, who he came and he used it, we don't give him such a big shiur, because he should have made shemrim, guards watch it. So therefore, Taisus says that he explains the three pshat like this. B'chtei of Rav is, in other words, that the word gets out that the pit is uncovered, that we could presume that the first guy heard. That's when the first guy is going to be liable already. Shmuel says, no, just down when the Shmuel is out there, we're not going to make him chayv, because you don't rely on just what you hear in the street until he's actually yediuhu, that he's notified. Yehuda says, no, until he's notified and he hire workers and he chopped down wood, and Taisus holds, the same thing would be the second guy also, you give him that shiur. It's just that we just don't have to notify him because he already knows. But Shmuel holds that no, right away you should have made guards that no one should fall into the bar. Right, so he's saying that because he's there, he should have put shaymim. Right, but he wasn't there, so he knows. So I'm going to get guys to chop wood. Yeah, it's a good shayla why. But yeah, can be. Yeah. So the Mishnah says kiso kudo. So he said, if you covered it appropriately, and the nafal techashar chamor remains, and the ox or donkey falls and dies, pot you can be pot because you did your job. You covered it appropriately. He was an einus. Says Gemara verstehnish. Even the kiso kudo, since he's saying he covered it appropriately, say hechanafal. So how exactly did an animal fall in and die? Says because it got rotten from the inside. So the Gemara says, okay, here's it gets a little bit complicated. Iboy had the following question. Let's say you covered a covering that could withstand oxen stepping on the manhole cover. But it's not strong enough to withstand the weight of camels. Okay. But also now what happened was camels came and ruined the cover. It became shaky and inferior because camels came and stepped in it. Then oxen came and fell in. Because Rashi explains, if the camels would fall in, that we would have no question that you can be chayv, because regarding camels, you are peshay, you are negligent, because camels can't hold camels. But the camels didn't fall in; they just weakened it. Then oxen came and they fell in. My word, Allah be. So they said, wait a second. Let's qualify the question first. If camels are common, of course, peshay, you're negligent because you know camels can come and weaken in and oxen can fall in. If camels are not common, well, honestly, then it's beyond your control. Well, why should I think that camels are going to come? So it says, the asla prakim. At times, in intervals, at times, they sometimes come. That's the question. Meaning, do we say, giving us the program, since some they come? So you're negligent even regarding oxen. Because the boy less good that they should entertain to say that camels are going to come and ruin the cover. I didn't know. Given the hashtami is leka, since now they're not generally here and they happen to come, honestly, it is beyond. It is considered aynus, and maybe you'd be potter. What's the Tashlan speaking right from our Mishnah? Our Mishnah said, kiso kudo. So if you covered, and this is like open to interpretations, you have to follow the Gemara's logic. Kiso kudo, if you covered the pit appropriately, but and the ox donkey fell in and died, potter can be potter. So what is the case of our Mishnah? What's the question? Like this. If you're saying the guy covered appropriately, meaning it could withstand dynamite, like it could withstand oxen and camels, say how did the animal fall in? And love, rather obviously, it was meaning it was fit enough to withstand oxen, as Getin Dabad, and it wasn't enough to hold camels. And what happened is that camels came along and weakened it. Now, let's further qualify this case. If their camels are usually there, some might putter. Why would you be putter? Of course you're negligent. Because you didn't make it roll the gamal. You know camels can come and they walk along the hole. Now, and if camels are not commonly found, well, pshita, that's obvious. Anasu, it's beyond his control. There's no reason for me to suspect camels are going to be here. Elav, rather obviously, the asna prakim. At times they come. And it happened to be Vasi Gmal Maru. Camels came along and weakened it. And the Asas from Anafa then oxen came along and fell inside of it. And what did we learn? Potter, you're going to be potter. When we said that you made the kisu kuro with this Gemara's long explanation, what was kuro? Kuro l'shvarim, but loy l'gamalim. Amma, you see, keeping the hashtaleka, since right now it's not to be expected. So it is an aynus. So you see that we will say that you're potter. They said loy, no, not necessarily. Lam kuro l'shvarim, kuro l'gamalim. Truth is, the halacha of our Mishnah that said that you made was appropriate for oxen and for camels. Oh, the kashlach, he said, hechanafel. How'd the animal fall in? That's what we said before. It disintegrated on its own. And that's how it fell in. But really, you made it karo. But maybe if you would have made only karo, l'shvarim, lo l'gamalim, maybe you actually would be chayv. Someone says, okay, let's bring a tashma raya from our Mishnah the other way around. What's the other half of the halacha was? The sefer said, lo kiso karo. You didn't cover it appropriately. But no, and oxen don't give and dies. Then you can be chayv. So, okay, wait a second. What's the case talking about? Elim, if you say you made a totally inferior cover, not good enough to hold oxen, not good enough to hold camel. Obviously, after say you can be chayiv, of course you can be chayiv. You didn't do anything. Rather obviously, it's karol l'shvan, it could withstand oxen, but not camels. Well, let's qualify this. If camels are commonly found, you're negligent, because of course you know camels are going to come along and ruin it. Camels are not commonly found. Well, honestly, it's totally an aynus. Elav, rather obviously, the aslan prakim comes at times. And they happen to come, the camels came along and weakened it. And then they're not there anymore. But oxen came and fell in. We see that you mechayiv. So we see keeping us some prakim to come at that time. You are considered negligent. That you should have entertained. That answers our question. No, truth is, you made it that it could withstand oxen, and you're right, it cannot withstand camels. But b'shchichi gemalim, it's because camels are common in that area. So that's why you can be chayv. Now, the kashraf, if you had a question, you said, peshehu, of course he's negligent. What would the chiddush be then? Says, you're right. I did not say Reisha Kasar. It's just because the Reisha spoke about that you made an appropriate covering. Not to say we said the inverse of not a good covering that you mechayev. But it's a pashta halacha. It's not something that we were saying any chiddushim. Don't tell me that it was only leprakim and then you want to answer our question. Ikadami, that those that say our entire conversation that we had up until now was not true. No, we never had a question. The kivin aslan prakim. If the camels do come at times, obviously peshay, you're negligent. The second person holds, no, you should have entertained to think about that this could happen, and therefore this was never a question. Ki bailan, our whole question was hachi hudi bailan was like this. It could withstand oxen. But it can not withstand camels. And camels are common. But camels didn't do anything. They didn't ruin it. But what ended up happening was it rotted on its own. And then the ox walks over and falls in. So interesting question, says Gemara. Meaning, do we say migui? It's a migui. Since you were negligent regarding camels, now guess what? No camel ended up coming. But you made a maisa peshia. So even though it's not what ended up happening, but have a peshia nevertheless, we'll consider negligent regarding the decomposing too. Like we don't say such a thing. We don't say me. We don't say since you negligent. That's not what ended up happening. Tais has a whole discussion regarding why do you say the what's called the halacha of tchilas b'peshia b'seif b'aynis, that should be a significant factor. Tais says no, that's only when your peshia went and contributed towards the aynis, which here it didn't. Tais has a whole conversation regarding that. But now the Gemara is discussing regarding the halacha of migui. Do we say migui that since you're negligent regarding this, we'll consider you to that or not? So let's just touch on bring a raya from halacha of our Mishnah. Again, we're going to go through the whole conversation again. Kisal kudo. If let's say you covered it appropriately, and an ox or donkey falls and dies, we said, "Pot, you're going to be exempt." We said on this that we explained all the way in the beginning before we started this whole Gemara discussion. The first thing that set this off was that what ended up happening was that it decomposed on its own. Now, what's the case talking about? If you made the cover appropriate for oxen and appropriate for camels, and the whole thing just fell apart by itself. You have this with bridges, you have it with buildings. Of course you can be patim. What should he have done? Elav, obviously no. It's to when you made the covering, you didn't make such a great covering. You made that enough that it could withstand oxen, but not enough to hold camels. And camels are common. But what ended up happening was, it wasn't even your fault at the end. It ended up just falling apart. And the Ketani Pater, we see that you can be Pater. We see we say we don't say, but wait a second. Once we're looking into the records, we see that you were negligent regarding camels. We're going to consider you negligent even regarding if it decomposes on its own. We don't say that because we say you're going to be Pater. So it says no, it's not a right. Because truth is, when we said you made a cover karo, was enough to withstand camels and oxen. But and it decomposed on its own. But the question you're asking is, wait a second. If you did everything you could, and it just got wormy, so what should you have done? No, it's not true. What would you say? And there is a chiddush. I have to tell you, you're going to be Pater. What would you say? He should have gone constantly and banged with his foot forcefully to check to make sure that it didn't just rot. It's a chiddush that we're not going to be machayim, and we're going to say that he's Pater. So it's no raya to our question. So Gemara says, okay, Tosh wants to bring a raya the other way. Again, the same like the first version to go the other way now. The next case in the Mishnah was like you didn't cover it appropriately. But now the ox or donkey falls and dies. Okay, then what's the case? If you say mamish he made a totally inferior cover, not good enough for camels, not good enough for oxen. Of course. No, must be talking. It was appropriate on some level for oxen. When we said it was loikaro, wasn't good enough for camels. Now, questions like this. If camels were common and they came and ruined it, so obviously peshehu. Obviously, this second version held that you're going to be negligent. So that's pash. And the camels are not found. So honestly, it's aynis. What do you mean? Why should I have expected this? And I made a covering good enough for oxen. Elalav, rather obviously, is talking about the shchich gemal. No, there are camels frequently found over there. But, so then wait a second, that should be chayiv, pashit. No, because with lima toichai. What ended up happening was it actually just rotted on its own. Ooh, Ketani, what is the Mishnah saying? Chayiving michayiv. Obviously we say that since you consider negligent regarding camels, we're going to consider negligent regarding, although it rotted on its own. So you see that you are chayiv in such a case. They said no. Truth is, when we said that you didn't make an appropriate cover, it was loy karo. It was, however, rabba l'shvarm for oxen, but loy karo l'gmal wasn't for the gmal and the shchichi gmal. And there were camels found, and camels came and ruined it. And then oxen came and fell inside. Now, Kashalach, you had asked, Pshita, that's an obvious case. Peshe was negligent. Because camels are frequent over there, and he made it that's not strong enough to hold camels, and the camel actually came and ruined it. So isn't that obvious? No. you're right, it is obvious. But Aidnas of Reisha, so could it's just because the Reisha said the case, which we said there is a chiddush. When you appropriately covered it, not a seva namin like you said. We also said the seva that you didn't cover it. But you're right. There's no chiddush in it, and therefore you can't bring a raya to our case. So when it says, okay, Tashma, let's try to bring a raya from a brisa. The brisa says, nafal teichei shar. If an ox that is, it falls inside the pit, an ox that is a cherish, the ox is a deaf mute, or the ox that is shayta mentally range, or the ox is a minor, or suma, or it's blind, or mahalach balayla is going at nighttime. So even if it's a pikeach, chayiv, the owner pit is going to be liable. But interesting, what people wouldn't realize, pikeach, if the animal is a regular sane animal, mahalach bayam, it's walking during the daytime, and it falls into the pit during the daytime, potter, the owner of the pit is going to be exempt because of what's called iboilu nemezel. Your animal should have looked and see where it's going, and therefore the owner of the pit's not liable. The question is, Vamai, but why? Even if you say that you have a svar iboilu nemezel, but then you should say midab b'shelin necheresh. The fact that you are negligent regarding any other ox that is a deaf mute, havnam b'shelin b'keach, you should be considered as a negligent regarding a regular animal too, because of migui. Ela shmamina. Obviously, you confirm from this. Elohim in migui. We don't say migui. Zimor shmamina. That we hear from this that yes, you're right, that we're not going to say migui, and therefore our question also not going to say migui, and therefore you're not going to be chayiv because ultimately it was a oinus shetli mitoichik. Anytime, those things.